one of the things that we have to do as election commissioners is following the census, and after the legislature completes their work on redrawing their legislative lines, which they did a year ago around now, I guess it was at the end of May is when they redrew their lines, we're required to go in and balance our precincts out after we get done doing that. So that's what we've spent most of last summer doing to get that prepared, because then at that point, once we had all our new precinct lines redrawn, then the county board, city council, school board, and other political subdivisions went in and redrew their lines for their sub-districts within the county. When I was redrawing precinct lines, and that's required out again by state law that we do that, some of the things I had to take into consideration was, first and foremost, was the way the legislature redrew their lines. State law says that a precinct can't be split between two legislative districts. So a whole precinct has to be within one legislative district. And so that's the first thing we had to do. When the legislature redrew their lines, they cut through a lot of our old precinct lines. So they almost cut them down in half. Sometimes they maybe just cut them off a square of one of our precincts, but they did those. I think I didn't count at the time, but I would imagine there was 25 or 30 precincts where they actually went through and cut through a line for us. The second thing I tried to do was to balance out the number of voters in each precinct. Now, state law allows us to have between 75 and I believe it's 1,750 voters in a precinct. The question is, what do you mean by a voter? Is a person that actually goes to the polling site or to the precinct to vote, or is it actually a voter that's registered? I tried to maintain ours around 500 to 600 people that actually would vote at that precinct. And that was based on the last presidential election, because that's the election where we have the most people go vote, so in a presidential election. So I tried to maintain around between 500 and 600. Some are going to be a little bit more than that, some are going to be a little bit less than that. I also tried to take into consideration geographical areas. I didn't want to have people having to cross a lot of streets or anything, busy streets, to get to a polling site if we could avoid that. I wanted to follow streets as straight and as compact as we can. On my city precinct map over here, you'll see we tried to square a lot of those up. It's easy to square precinct lines up in the inner part of the city because the streets run straight. When you get into some of our newer annex areas, as the city's moved on the outskirts of town, city streets don't follow straight lines as much. So you're going to see some more lines that are more curved and everything, but we tried to follow major streets in that way. So that's what we tried to look at that as well. When we were changing some precinct times, we were also trying to make sure all of our polling sites are required to be accessible for the handicapped. And so we we made some changes with that we found some locations that would be even better for those people that might have more difficulty getting into a polling location. So we try to follow that. The other thing is I looked at some cost savings for the county. I'm estimating in a presidential election we'll probably save the county between $25,000 and $30,000 having fewer number of polling sites. We pay all our poll workers, so if we have fewer people working the polls, we won't have quite as high cost on poll workers, plus training, and also plus programming our machines, our counting machines, for each precinct, because we're charged by precinct when we do that. Kind of the last thing that I looked at too, and I think is really important for us, is that we have had a large increase in the number of people voting early. So the number of people actually voting at the polling sites on election day has become less. And so we're trying to balance those things out. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how many people were affected by the change, but I would imagine about 60 to 70% of people will still be voting at their same polling location. It'll probably be that other 30 to 40% that might have a new location. That's why the polling place card is going to go out. That'll tell them where their location is. We're a little over, 5 weeks from election day in May, so people need to keep this card to remind them. That's important that they have that. I hope that I've tried to explain. I do have some smaller versions of the two maps up here. On this side of me is our City of Lincoln precinct map, That's a large version. And this is our rural precinct map for outside the city of Lincoln. And I'd be happy to provide that with you. One other thing I'd just like to share with you is in 2008 we had 223 precincts. The average number of registered voters per precinct was 802. On election day, that was registered voters. On election day, the average number of people that actually went per precinct was 443. That's only increased for what I estimate in 2012, and this is an estimation, and this is on a presidential election year. The number of registered voters will go up to almost 900, 893, and the number of voters average per precinct would probably be about 461. So we didn't go up that many per precinct. But so our goal was to try to consolidate and merge, combine precincts to allow us to have a little bit more balance between the precincts. In some cases, we may have taken 2 precincts and made into 1. In some cases, that may be 3 precincts reduced down to 2, or 5 precincts reduced down to 4 or 3 in some various areas. That's really what we were trying to do at the time. In many cases, they might be only they might be just moved a little ways away. In many cases, they may have a new precinct name but still voting at the same polling location. It just depends where everything happened. With that, I hope I've explained it well, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.